Hello, everybody. My name is Hannah Weiser, and I graduated from Georgia State University, where I majored in game design and development. The main project that I'm a part of now is actually a card game called Aglaeus, which has been really fun to work on and just an invaluable experience to be able to learn how to be effective in a non digital medium. That was new for me. I want to give a quick thank you to ATL GameDevs. Thank you guys for everything that you do for this server, game jams, everything. But also thank you for inviting me to be here today. It's always good to get a message saying, "Hey, do you wanna talk about this thing that you're really into?" Duh. Always fun. So thank you to ATL Game Devs. Thank you to everybody for being here. And yeah, without further ado, let's get right into UI UX in games, a foolproof guide to designing intuitive interactions. Okay. So level 1, we're just gonna be defining terms. UI, UX, how do they go together? What are they? Getting everybody primed. All right. So starting with UI, which stands for user interface. UI is the way that humans and computers communicate. So like it's the start menu that you see when you click on that you can click into to get into your favorite game. It's settings menus, it's input prompts, dialog boxes. All of that are examples of user interface. Today, we're going to be looking at the aesthetics of interfaces, which would technically be GUI, which stands for graphical user interface. I personally don't use the G. I just say UI. So you're going to hear me say UI because it makes sense within context. So we might be asking, why am I mentioning this? I have to mention it in this presentation because we need to talk about GUI. How did we let such an unfortunate phonetic interpretation of this acronym allow us to just throw around the term GUI in full seriousness? One of the best parts about UI UX, being able to say GUI instead of GUI. But I will be saying UI. Okay. Then we have UX, which stands for user experience. UX design makes sure that the player has a good experience overall by identifying and mitigating pain points that are not bugs. UX design does exist outside of UI design in games. Oops, sorry, wrong one. Games like Celeste incorporate UX principles into things like character movement. This is one of the more basic examples, but if you look, the main character, Madeline, she is jumping off of nothing there. So she has some pretty crazy coyote time that is I mean, the mechanics in Celeste are really widely beloved for a lot of these affordances that you get, but she shouldn't be able to do that realistically, right? Laws of physics say no. But UX is not about realism. It's about making sure that the game feels good, making sure that the game feels aligned with what the player's expecting the game to do. And jump being able oh, it's on Celeste, coyote time? Oh, okay. Dang. Okay, well, let me know if there's a weird slide. Yeah. Feel free to cut me off again. We saw how finicky, this presenter view can be. Sorry about that. Anyways, uh, so yeah, games like Celeste, UX principles, doing this, act of defying physics is good UX, surprisingly, because UX is not about, being realistic. It's about being realistic with the player's expectations. Um, So that just feels good. It allows players to feel more immersed because the game's doing what you expect it to do, even if that expectation isn't realistic. So, but back to UX in terms of UI, the picture on the slideshow shows a little game tip being displayed during a loading scene. Game designers want players to be fully immersed and engaged, right? That's the goal of anybody who's making a creative media project. But with video games, there is a hard fact that just sometimes things take more time to load than we would like. There is loading time, and that's like the antithesis. Oh, is it still not changing? Oh no. No, I wonder if it's just my internet speed? Can y'all hear me okay? Huh, weird. Should I try sharing the other way and have it full screen? Let me try doing that, see if that makes it any better. Yeah, see if that helps. Sorry about that, guys. I'm trying to do my fancy presenter view.
It was really weird how it felt like every time Brooke spoke, the slides updated, like
Oh,
the frame rate was tied to Brooke's voice.
she's magic. Alright, let's hope that this is better. Y'all feel free to let me know. Sorry about that. Yeah. Okay. Back to UX in terms of UI. Everybody can see this slide? Yeah. Okay, sick. Lovely. Okay, so the picture on the slideshow, it shows a game tip that is being displayed during a loading scene. Again, what is our goal? We want people to be fully engaged and immersed in the things that we put out. So again, hard fact, things take time to load. That is the antithesis of engaged and immersed players. So what do we do about that? So that brings us to piece together the role of UX in UI UX. What we're seeing in these images is a whole I mean, they're loading screens, but it's a whole bunch of stuff to keep players engaged. So at a UI minimum, loading screens need to have one thing functionally. They need to say, "Hello, I'm a loading screen, game loading," and that's it. That's what they need to have for their interface. Um, Anything that is further than that is UX principles used to improve UI design. So some of these screens feature like perpetual movement, animation, something to let players know that the game's still running, something that it hasn't crashed. Um, but what all of these screens have in common is there's some kind of information written about the game here. So sometimes, oh my gosh, oh no, I, I, hmm. Let me just.
Someone in the text chat had a good idea. I think they noticed like it seems to update every time Brooke speaks because I think that's when you're alt tabbing to Discord potentially.
Should I just alt tab to okay, I'll alt heard. Okay, back to this is work okay, I'll keep coming in and out. Alright, good. We have a strat. Thanks, guys, for troubleshooting that with me. Okay, so back to the role of UX and UI UX. Whether these little blurbs that games give you, whether that be good tips or lore or a mix of both sometimes, games really seem to enjoy giving these blurbs. And I really like the blurbs. I think that they're really smart. Loading screens just inherently break the fourth wall because it's something that it's a loading screen, right? So us as players, we're just stuck in this game purgatory, at the mercy of our processing power. And in this moment, even if I don't need the tips, even if I don't need the lore, it's putting me into the game. It's giving me information about the game that makes me think about the game. So even if let's take the Clash of Clans example, even if I don't need to know that upgrading my walls slows down the enemy because I already know that, when I read that, I'm now imagining an invasion and I'm thinking about my base layout and remembering that I need to upgrade my town hall so that I can even access purchasing the next level walls. Um, and when I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking about what I want to do in this game. And more importantly, I'm not thinking about what I would rather be doing instead of waiting for this game to load. As you can imagine, a pretty big pain point is closing out of things just because of loading times and getting bored, basically. Um, so, yeah, with all of those terms defined, let me tell you why this is all important. Let me tell you why you need UI. It's just slow. Hmm. Okay. All right. So the first reason why you need UI is because it makes a good first impression, right? So partly you're getting this immersion. If you can immediately immerse players into your game environment just in your start menu, awesome. That's ideal. But that's kind of higher level. What you're doing with a good UI upon first impression is you are showing people who are coming and giving time to your creation that your creation is worth their time, right? Because it's an investment. Even if it's just time, that's still an investment. So these first impressions, they can prime players. They can immediately inform a bias. And if we can get that bias to be on our side simply because of good UI UX design, oh my goodness, that's amazing. We can get away with so many more things and do so many more awesome things. All right. So the second thing is reinforcing mechanics. So a good UI UX can 100% reinforce mechanics. Meaning, so things like meaningful prompts, icons, indicators, all of that kind of stuff is reinforcing that the player is making the correct or incorrect decision, and also make sure that the player is properly rewarded and disincentivized at crucial moments that otherwise would make the gameplay a bit too abstract to be fun. Um, Another example of this is Final Fantasy 15 to be specific, but the Final Fantasy series widely beloved. There's a gajillion in one of those games, right? It's a very loved series. But people criticize Final Fantasy 15 not for anything other than the fact that the quest line was presented in a way that was not intuitive to interact with. You had to go through a bunch of submenus in order to see what your active quests were. They weren't just easily accessible and stuff like that. It doesn't matter how good the quests are. It doesn't matter how good a lot of things are. If players can't engage with what it is you want them to engage with, or it's difficult, there's a lot of barrier of entry uh, to be able to get players to engage in the way that you want them to. Players aren't going to engage because again, it is this time commitment, and we can commit our times to doing cooler things. All right. We're on accessibility. All right. So accessibility in games is super important, and I'm very excited because I've seen it be discussed larger recently. It's accessibility isn't about making things easier. The difficult things in games should still be difficult, but it does make sure that more people, the people who want to play the game and have fun, can play the game, no matter their abilities, no matter their skill, no matter their previous experience with any specific genre or games in general. So things like scalable text, button remapping, colorblind modes, these are good examples of like on the nose accessibility for these like physical limitations. But even, dare I say, I mean, the screenshot's right there, so we've known this is coming, but League of Legends, extremely accessible for a MOBA. That is not an accessible genre of game at all, but it has a really good onboarding system that gets you into the game without, it's a bot match, so you don't get into the toxicity yet. So it's all fun, it draws people in. It lets people see what this game could be like when you're winning, when you're having fun. But not only that, there's a good ping system, so people don't need to be mic'd up in order to play random matches with other people. So all of that stuff are accessibility measures to get the max amount of people possible, if not everybody who wants to play your game, to be able to play your game. And I think that UI UX is one of the best ways to accomplish that. So lastly, we have emotional impact. So UI UX is able to punctuate moments that otherwise wouldn't hit as hard. So one example of that is in Sea of Thieves, which is a multiplayer pirate sim. Sea of Thieves has a really cool diegetic UI. So, like for example, you have to go down to the map room in the on the ship in order to get to the map. It's not some overlay, right? With that, there's also an interface for drinking grog, the alcohol. Um, and when you drink grog, I know that this is a multiplayer game, and I know that with multiplayer games, there's a lot of fun little things that you could do to pass time because you need to wait for people and other people need to do things when you're playing multiplayer games like this. And I thought that this was just one of those things. No, it blurs your vision. It like makes you stumble around, and the more grog that you drink, the worse it gets, to the point of you can no longer interact with your interface. You can't do anything. Um, and that's funny, and it's a funny little thing to experience with friends. But really what it's doing is it's tying your emotions to the in-game pirate self that you have. It helps you get into the correct emotional state that the game developers want you to be in. Sea of Thieves is a game where you're encouraged to explore, you're encouraged to have fun, you're encouraged to be whimsical. And if something as small as like this like little interface where you can drink grog and that will mess up your vision, um, something as small as that can accomplish it, can accomplish the emotional impact that you need to have in order to get players to interact with your game in the best way that they can, that you would like them to. So all of that to say, you need UI. UI is your game. Remember, it's communication between us and the machines. And when that communication is solid, you get a much more polished final product than if you were to just leave that on the burner for a number of reasons. So after my propaganda campaign, let's get into my process. So this is my process for like planning UI. Let me actually change the slides for everybody else. Um Okay, so the very first thing that I do with my process, and I would like to say that my process is a foolproof way to, my planning process is a foolproof way to design intuitive interactions. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to look and see what the thing that I'm doing is supposed to look like. Because I might know what an inventory looks like in the game genres that I'm used to playing, but the way that an inventory is presented, or the way that anything is presented, it's going to need to evolve and adapt to fit different game environments. So let's show an example of this. Oh, look, an inventory. I will just go ahead and copy and paste that. And perfect. Our favorite game, Skyrim. Pretty bad, right? Does not fit. So the first thing that we're going to be wanting to do is we're going to want to find inspiration from games of similar genres.
Update slide.
So
Sorry.
thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. No, that's so helpful. I just get into it. I get too excited and I forget I need, yeah, thank you. Um, so each of these websites allow you to search not only by content, but by genre, platform, etc. And all of that will help you to refine down your search. Um, and I encourage you to refine to your search because what I like to do is I try to go through all of the possible references if I can. Um, so I'll take a good while for this phase because the goal here is to dissect what's consistent across multiple games, what works, what I like, why. This research for different elements, this is going to be research for different elements, and it's going to be research for the rest of what I'm doing, but it's going to be research for the different elements that I may want to include. And I don't want to miss out on information that may have led to a higher quality interface because I thought that I had already found enough reference. And of course, there's a balance to strike here. I feel like I'm thinking about that like Minecraft keep picking away meme. But a wise man once said, don't I don't want to jeopardize function because of a hasty assumption. That was Socrates. Just kidding. He did not say that. Um, so okay, the next thing that we're gonna be doing is making a mood board. We're putting the mood in mood board. This is gonna be the most free flowing bit of research that we're gonna be doing, because it doesn't have to be anything specific. And in fact, I actually encourage to stay away from game screenshots for this because it's just not needed, unless it's 100% fitting. So we know what games of similar genres contain. We've gathered the vibes we've seen from other games, and now we know all of that information and we take it and we take information about our own game and we can make something that evokes this like custom feeling that our game is supposed to be giving to players. So the mood board on the left, that was for a game where you're left to automate this desolate planet. So the mood board's trying to give feelings of isolation and industrialization and a gloomy atmosphere, contrasting with that like advanced technology. Um, these are themes that I hope to communicate in the art style of this interface. So these mood boards are going to help inform those decisions. So for the literal vibe, the mood that our UI is supposed to invoke, but also the art style that we're going to be doing it in, is what this mood board is for. So, okay, on to the next one. Design style. So we've looked at other games feature and we've thought about why, and we've decided upon what we want to feature and what we want our features to communicate. Right? That's a lot. We're still going. Yeah. So now it's time to make decisions on specific styles of presentation that we want to incorporate. How do we literally want to present this interface to the world? So for this, you don't need to stay within your genre. Do look at game screenshots, but you don't need to stay within your genre. You've already done the legwork. You know how to find appropriate references. Yeah. And even if you see here on the right, that was for the like management game and I was using shooter game screenshots just because the format was applicable. I was looking for that like 3D flat, kind of like pseudo diegetic style. Um, on the left, we need a design style that was a bit more tailored to the specifics of our game. And I can't show the specifics of that because, yeah, work in progress. But yeah, the UI is going to be a lot more directly intermeshed with the gameplay. So instead of trying to fit us in a box, but also while not wanting to reinvent the wheel, because I'm trying to work based on people's pre-existing ideas of things, I dissected different elements from different games to be able to make one clear Franken vision. And I had to explain a little bit more than I otherwise would have if it just did fit in a box, but that's okay because it's helpful at the end of the day. And you can use these same websites to gather your images for this as well, interface in game UI database. Love that these exist specifically for games. They're very awesome. Um, then lastly, we can make decisions on colors and fonts. So I'm not going to be giving the specifics on these because that's just a whole other can of worms that I'm definitely not even qualified to teach or to talk about. But I did want to recommend some good resources that I use. So the first one is LowSpec, which is a good website.
Are
It
you on
has
a font
pre-made.
slide? Sorry.
Yes, I am. Thank you. LowSpec is a cool website for pre-made palettes because normally the artist will include a pixel drawing using the palette that they've uploaded, which is really fun. Um, because it allows you to see what the mood is going to be when you start using that color palette. Because again, not I am not qualified to teach any kind of color theory or typography, so that's really helpful for me because that's just not my strong suit. But I'll also use color wheel websites. So the one that I use is Adobe Color, but you can use any color wheel website. I think that it definitely helps me to find like triadic colors analogous, and get that information fed to me because then I can make better decisions with that information. Um, there's a website that I was recommended that was super life changing that you can also use to check color contrast. It's called WebAIM, Web Accessibility in Mind. There's a lot of information on this website that is really awesome, and it tells you directly whether or not you pass these different accessibility measures. So I definitely highly recommend running at least like the text on background that you're doing to make sure that you're meeting these accessibility measures and that your text is going to be readable to the masses. All right. And then back over here, these are the two font websites that I've used. You can use any font website you want. You just want to make sure that you're not violating any copyrights. These two websites you can search and make sure that the fonts that you're using are 100% free. Um, I would definitely do that, even if you don't think that you're gonna sell your game. Like, even if there's so many reasons why you wouldn't need to use 100% free fonts, there's so many of them out there, and it saves you a possible headache later on. So yeah, try to search for free font. At least search for free fonts first, and then cross that road if you get to it. Yeah. So that is color and fonts. I put them on a single image for organizational purposes, but you can organize this info however you want. You can organize any of this information however you want, but organize this information, do this research. Because what you're doing is you're taking this to then make everything else. And that's not to say that this can't change. This can change. This is kind of like a UI game design document. So it's going to be a living document. Uh, but those changes will be purposeful when you make them because I find what ends up happening is if you don't have these single places where everything is declared and all the research is done, um, what gloomy looks like to you in January, it could be very different than what gloomy looks like to you in September, right? So just different ideas of things are going to change over time, and what the internet's giving to you for these searches is going to change over time. So you want to be able to get this all done in a short, concise period because then you also have references for everything else. You have a lot of inspiration to start from. And it's really worthwhile, even if it does end up getting changed. Because, yeah. And I know that was technically five different things to account for before you even begin your work. But remember, guys, as a wise man once said, now it's Aristotle, I don't want to jeopardize function because of a hasty assumption. And UI UX work is all about function. We're playing on people's pre-existing understanding of the world, and that means that we need to know what the masses are thinking when they see an interface. You need to know where things go to be referential without being distracting, how that differs across genres, cultures, etc. And it is just madness to assume that we would thoroughly know any of that for certain. So we research. And research is the most foolproof way to design intuitive interactions. So thank you all for having me and for listening. And if there's any questions, definitely let me know. I guess I can also unshare. Aristotle was a wise man. See
While
typing.
people put their questions in, I'll keep you company. Okay, never mind. The question came in faster than I
Okay.
expected.
Oh, What was the word used to describe one of the game UIs? Oh, diegetic. Okay, diegetic UI is like non-diegetic UI. Diegetic is within the game world. So non-diegetic UI is if I were to give you a non-diegetic map that you had to look at, that would be like just an overlay. You press escape or you press M and the map shows up as an overlay. Diegetic UI is I have to go down to the map room in this ship. I have to go down to the map room cabin and look at the map here. So it's basically the same idea, but it's supposed to help with immersion and yeah. I always associated GUI with any UI that is in the game world, like in-game prompts. Yeah, diegetic equals VR UI, kind of. That's yeah. I guess diegetic is going to be a big thing in VR games, huh? That's yeah. Ooh, several people are typing. Discord equals bad UI. Do the characters have to know about it, like diegetic stuff in TV? What do you mean? Do the characters have to know about it? Like, do the characters have to know that it's existing? Uh, it should probably. I think it depends. I mean, diegetic has been a term that's been used loosely for things. Um, so maybe not, but I feel like they should, right? Because if it is truly diegetic, it is within the game world. It is something that the player should be able to interact with in their game world, right? Even as far as like a compass, like bringing out a compass on a hand. Aloris made a game where you had I forgot what that stid. You had a thing that you looked at. It was really cool. Yeah, stid. It was really cool diegetic UI where it was just like a tracker that you're looking at. Yeah, that's diegetic UI. What's your process for updating slash improving UI based on user testing and feedback? That's a good question. Um, honestly, trial and error. I've been very fortunate to be able to have friends and just communities where I can get people to play test. So trial and error, I've learned over time, um, uh, just what ends up working. So there's that as well. But what ends up working at any given time might not work for something else. So really just trial and error. Um, but also, again, that whole research phase is supposed to try to mitigate that as much as possible. I like the name of the studio you work for. Me too. So fun. What's your biggest UI UX pet peeve when playing games? When games try to make things diegetic for no reason. I think that the point of diegetic UI is for immersion, and I see games nobody asked me to list one off the top of my head right now because I don't that my brain is mucus. But yeah, I think that forced diegetic UI really sucks because it just fully negates the purpose. Um, yeah. Um, right, that sounds purely yeah. Oh, Far Cry 2's map was like that. Yeah, I always like, different game suggestions to check out for cool UI. How do you balance the need for emotional UX versus cut and dry UX? What do you mean, emotional UX versus cut and dry UX? Are there any games you know of that reinvented the wheel and had confusing/bad UI? Um, a personal opinion for trying to reinvent the wheel, and I hate giving this as a reference because Fortnite is a game that I play, but I know that it's not like the game to reference. But Fortnite updated their UI to make it look snazzier, but it just feels like form over function. And I just find that oftentimes you can run into that, especially like me. I'm nowhere near the top of my field. I am just getting into my field, so I should not be inventing any wheels. At least not if I'm trying to sell to the masses or something. Um, how early in your game making process did you work on UI? Pretty quickly. I made one game at a summer camp in high school, and then the first thing that I was thrown into when I started making games in college was UI. So it's kind of like I fell into it. Um, but I'm so happy that I fell into it because it works with my brain. The human element of it, yeah. What are good stuff to add to my portfolio for game UI UX? What I've learned is that you don't need to make an entire like, don't try to make an entire game because oftentimes what ends up happening with that I mean, if that is your motivation, heck yeah, by all means do it, but don't feel like you need to make, like, an entire thing. Um, Oftentimes just showing little elements of what you can do and what you've done can be really cool, and it can show that you're adaptable and can do different things. Do you have any tip Yeah. Do you have any tips on how to get good at picking fonts and other small aspects of your UI? Like once you have a good base for your mood boards and references, how do you get good at tying all your graphic elements together? Hope. I mean, there's some method to the madness. There's just you can use shape language to be like, "Ooh, this font looks a little bit angry," or like, "This font looks a little bit silly." So you can use shape language for that. Um, and like colors, the same thing. You can use color language to do stuff like that. And like everything. So I guess it depends, but I don't know. Honestly, I do end up a lot of trial and error for that. What's the worst game UI you ever saw? There's I don't wanna say. I won't say. I don't wanna be controversial. A lot of man games, I will say, I feel are less and man games is so subjective to me, so who even knows what that means? Um, I think what they mean when should the UX be emotionally engaging versus not. So your UI UX, in my opinion, it's one of those things that's like it's like good audio design. If it's good, you shouldn't really notice it unless you're looking for it. So I think that it depends on the gameplay, really. Um, so yeah, it depends on when you're trying to make that emotional impact in your gameplay. But I mean, you can also get inventive if you see an area to kind of foreshadow emotions in the future and you can accomplish that with UI UX. Heck yeah. Um it's okay, those games that are like the like ancient civilization games where it's like it's hype and this is such a weird take because they're so hyper functional that they lose beauty. Do y'all know what I'm talking about? I don't even and I feel like I'm gonna offend people with that because like those are fun games. I like playing those games. um I don't know if this was touched on earlier. Do you struggle with scaling UI across different screen sizes slash ratios? I'm very OCD about making things symmetrical and stuff, so I'm never satisfied. Yeah, for scaling things, yeah, for sure. I'm getting better in Unity about that. But yeah, scaling can be difficult. If I'm just doing like a layout, it's not difficult. And what I learned from a teacher, which is a really good tip, is like if you're working in a software where you can use like little cubes and whatnot and measure out the distance that something should be. And then uh, maybe Excel games? Maybe Excel games. You can measure out the distance that something should be and or that something is and then be able to find everything else. I don't know if that's helpful though. Um, Strategy games or FPS? Oh gosh, I don't know. Is that like me either or is that like beauty looks different to different demographics, I guess. Yes, that's also true. It's just my eyes and it's totally opinionated. Uh, we can't all like the same games, yeah. No, you're not mean. I've seen a lot of games where the main focus is just cool mechanics and getting the gameplay loop out of the way, but they don't have any considerations for aesthetics or UI UX. Yeah, and they can still be good. They can still be fun. And not to say that like UI UX needs to exist everywhere. Um, like that if you don't have a good person to do that for you, like you have limitations, and at the end of the day, you got to do what you got to do. And yeah, but yeah, I noticed that as well, especially with UX. I think that that's not really being incorporated into UI as much as I would like it to. I meant, were you talking about the ancient civilizations games? Yeah, strategy games, like you have like armies and you're like base building, and it's like, all right, now I'm gonna like make like a lumber camp over here and stuff like that. Yeah, man games that I play. Yeah, God games. What was a UI UX mistake you learned from? Y'all wanna see something bad? I can show you. Um, so if we go to my itch.io page, so I was trying to do something here, and that something was people, despite, and this is just a thing, gamers don't read, and I think that I probably learned that meme from this, but I was doing a lot. Oh, this is loud. I was doing a lot of game jams at this time, and I kept getting comments that were like, "You didn't explain the mechanics." And I'm like, "Oh man, like they're right here." So I was like, "All right, I'm gonna explain what's going on, and y'all are going to have to live with it." And I decided to code a system to make it so that if you try to cut off this narrator, he will get mad at you and he'll reiterate what it is that he was just saying. So you can't click early on this. Not a good idea because now I can't even skip through this. Yeah, that was one of my worst mistakes. It was like I was trying to fix the fact that people weren't reading things, but I was trying to fix it in the most like Machiavellian, like dictator kind of way. It was funny, but goodness. Um yeah, gamers don't read. Thank you. Yeah, I still think it's funny, but it's funny and it's nice that I figured out how to do that with code because that was a time when that was new for me, like, just scripting dialogue and whatever. Um, so yeah, it was definitely good practice for me, and honestly, I think that that's a good thing to take away is, like, we can all make trash. It's gonna be good practice, though. Yeah. Can you reiterate your thoughts on Ancient Civilizations game again? I apologize, but I didn't follow. So okay, good now that we know that what we're talking about. That was just my like, what is some of the worst UI that you've seen? It's definitely functional, but it's just, I don't know. I feel like I'm always like, this is form over function. It's the one where I'm like, this is function over form. I don't like this aesthetically. With that being said, no idea how I would do it better. Haven't even thought about that. I'm just complaining. When working on my game, how soon in the process would you recommend I build out my UI for the menu and overall color slash aesthetic? Well, I think everybody's process is different. I think that if you think that your UI is going to help you inform your gameplay decisions, then feel free. But like I said, I do think that UI is its own beast, but at the end of the day, it should support mechanics. Um, so yeah, if I think that it's also fair to wait to put it in and kind of maybe keep a list of like these are cool areas where I was thinking about doing some kind of UI UX thing and then doing it at the end. Which's the biggest challenge you face coordinating with developers to make sure the UX supports the gameplay? Oh, I don't know. I don't coordinate with developer. Oh, I see what you're saying. I thought that you were saying like me coordinating like a team of developers. Um, that's a good question. Hmm. I don't know. I don't know. I don't maybe I need that question rephrased. I feel like my brain is drawing a blank. Yeah. Do you use any AI tools to aid you in your process? Yes. I have to admit, yes, I do. I just use ChatGPT, not really to actually aid me in my process, but sometimes it's easier to give ChatGPT a bunch of specific things that I've been running into. Um, oh no, I don't. Not for art. I'm just trying to. It's me trying to figure out how to do things. So it's easier to type in a whole bunch of stuff and try and get ChatGPT to synthesize it than it is to go and Google that. Last point, maybe Paradox. Ooh, always love a suggestion looking at the evolution of Paradox games. Okay, cool. No, yeah, I mean, that's an action item for me. Yeah, yeah. Do you have any tips for how to develop good UI UX when solo deving, since it can be incredibly time consuming to source references and create mood boards while also handling all the other aspects to developing your game? Um, don't I mean, don't the fact that you're doing research and making mood boards is more than if you're not, is more than some. So I think that if you don't have all the time in the world to like research and whatever, research what you can research, especially if you're solo deving. Figure out what you can figure out, and yeah, I just wouldn't do as thorough of like a look through process of everything. But I do still think that like all of these decisions, because there's these different elements of UI. So I think that making some kind of decision on them, even if you get into it pragmatically and you're like, whoa, I need to change that. Um, yeah. So I think that just not being too rough on yourself when you're doing it, and then being okay with going back and revising if you need to. Do you think it's okay for a personal project to just wing the UI UX and fix it up as you go to your taste, as long as you document these ideas? Yeah, honestly, like I'm I'm I don't look at UI that uh like I understand reasons why UI UX would get neglected. There's literal like there's literal reasons. I think that at bigger studios, it's kind of sad when it gets neglected, but especially for student games, like if you just don't have the manpower, you don't have the manpower, and that's okay. But do you think the vision needs to be clear? I think it should be as clear as you can get it, and then just you can be open to revising it if you feel like it doesn't end up working. How does your process differ when trying to make effective UI UX in a game jam? I just try my best. Back to what I was saying about like the little elements of like you don't need an entire thing to be good. So just try your best, whatever it is that you're trying. Like I knew for a while that something that I wanted to work on for games was being able to figure out how to make these like 3D menus. So I made sure to figure out how to make a 3D menu in that game jam, and then the rest of it didn't really matter. Uh there's a couple game jams where it was just kind of one thing that I was like, "This is gonna be my thing," or like 2 things. So take what you want to take out of it and don't really stress about the rest. Yeah. We're all gonna be quoting random philosophers for quotes that they did not say. Suggestions for finding a UI UX designer to work with. I don't know. I'm sure that this server, I'm sure that there's a lot here. I'm sure. They really could have. They really could have said that. Okay. Are there any more UI UX questions about the presentation? Have a UI project that I want to use for my portfolio where I used AI imagery just for my background, so I had something to design on top of it. Is there rules behind this? Should I not use AI in this way when it comes to applying? If you can make a background that's easy, do it, because on the off chance that someone's like, "Hey, what is that?" You can be like, "Oh, it's a background that I made." I feel like personally I wouldn't have an issue on with that, but I am no authority. So I don't know. I maybe don't listen to me. You probably shouldn't though, just because AI is really poorly regarded, and like AI art in particular is pretty poorly regarded. You can maybe get somebody else to make backgrounds for you, or find like copyright free stuff online. In this climate, yeah. Is there any other UI UX in games? Oh, more. What have you found to be the best font size for type and readability? There's standards for it that I can't list off the top of my head. I think it really depends. It depends on so many different factors. It depends. The one that your grandma can read. I don't know. Oh, I mean, feel free to add me here. Here, I'll put uh my art Instagram is only just now beginning. So yeah, but yeah, cool. I think that that looks. Oh, okay, cool and sweet.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. Um,
Yeah, thanks for having me.